Hello and welcome to Pontus Points. I've changed houses, which means that I've not been able to record anything for a long time, but here we are, Pontus Points. As normal, there is a tendency for polarization in debates, and one of the debates I've been participating in recently is the debate pro and con electric vehicles. Some people are passionate about their combustion engine cars, so the ICEs, and some are passionate about their EVs, and they fail to see any problem with the others, any shortcomings on the selection that they have made themselves. And I'm not like that. So I am an EV owner, but I would like to assist you here with a number of arguments why an EV might not be for you. Because I think that's only fair to see that there are actually use cases not supported by the selection that I have made. There are pros and cons with everything, and you value the different aspects here differently than I do, and of course your use case is different. You live in a different environment than I do, and you make other priorities than I do. The only thing I would like to ensure is that you make justified evaluation of those. So you are evaluating the arguments that are actually there and not bring up arguments that are absolutely null and void. So here are the valid arguments for not buying an EV. Alright, so why shouldn't you buy an EV? Again, it might be that you have a way of life that doesn't suit having an EV. There might be so that you are using your car in a way which doesn't make an EV a valid reason, a valid option for you. But there could also be the case where you're actually arguing against an EV against better knowledge, or that your arguments are actually not really relevant. So let's look at the real arguments here. And I will be frank and honest because, again, owning an EV, I know there are shortcomings and aspects that are not good, where the ICE is handling that better. But not all of the arguments that ICE fans bring up to the table are actually valid. So let's go through a number of the arguments and see if they hold any value. No charger accessible at home makes it impractical. This is a really strong one. The key to having an EV is that you charge it at home or very close to your home, at the price which you pay for having it at your home. If you need to always use public chargers, that means that you will need to sit there and wait while it's charging, not practical. It will also mean that you would need to pay a public price for the charging, which is very much higher than the price you will pay for your electricity at home. So this could be a really strong argument actually against holding an EV. And also the rollout for public transportation EV charging, for EV charging across your country might be different depending on the country you live in. Living in Sweden, this is absolutely not an argument because the country is filled with chargers. I'm fully aware that depending on the car you choose, it might be your access to certain chargers might be less. Or you would need to pay more. But the argument that you cannot travel across the country because there are so few chargers, that's really void in most countries. But I am aware that in the UK, for instance, the rollout of chargers is less than in most other of the kind of main Europe. So again, you have to look at, do I really need chargers like far away from where I live? Do I ever go there? And if that's a scarce resource in places you don't go, that's not really impacting you. But if it is so that you are traveling and you need public charging where you're traveling, then this could be a valid argument. Could. I'm not saying it is, it could. For me, the main reason is this. My use case makes it totally impractical. So if you are, let's go back to, so charging an EV is a process that takes time, and you fill up the batteries, and when the batteries are totally full, you have a traveling distance of the amount of energy you have stuffed into the batteries. But if your travel distance is longer than the energy you have in your batteries, then that means that you need to charge again. So let's look at this. If your normal traveling distance is well under the amount of sort of the distance your EV can travel on one charge, then this is not a problem, because you charge at home. Let's assume that you are traveling all you need, and then you get back home, and then your EV is not empty, so you didn't need to publicly charge it. You didn't need to wait for anything. You just went home and plugged it in again and charged it. So there is no delay or any issue with the charging then in that case. The issue comes when you're traveling a distance longer than your the distance in your EV. Normally, let's say that is a travel around like 3 hours. Most people would need to eat during such a long travel and, well, take a toilet break or a coffee break or something. So charging your EV for 30 minutes might not be an issue. That's actually not really prolonging your travel compared to filling up your gas in your ICE. So it's not taking additional time if you have the habit of like stopping and eating. But if you're one of those that just grab a burger or something else from a drive-thru and just continue, and you can go for hours and hours, then that charging will actually make your travel longer. If you are also traveling longer than that, so you're traveling so you need to charge a second time, eating again might not be a really relevant option. That actually means that you need to wait while the car charges. So that's when you're hitting that second charge, that is a time where an EV is actually sort of making it more difficult for you. So if you are traveling more than, let's say, 1.8 times the distance that your EV can charge, then the EV becomes practical. And if you're also doing so under a time pressure, because if the additional 30 or 40 minutes there is not a problem, then you don't have any problem. It's only if you're traveling long distances beyond, like, let's say 2 times the distance that you can charge in your EV, that's when you're really adding time traveling with an EV compared to traveling with an ICE. And how many times a year do you do that? If that is frequent, then this is a real problem. If it happens like once a year, it's not really a problem. The daily usage is what you should focus on, and then you should sort of accept that there are shortcomings on a very infrequent basis. Again, my view. But if you are living somewhere and you're traveling to your summer house and it's 1,000 kilometers, you are going to spend time sitting in your car waiting for it to charge. And if you're doing that on a regular basis, this could actually be something that annoys you. Environment. This is a very, very common argument amongst ICE car owners. They're focusing on battery technology and the rare minerals that goes into batteries. And let's just also be really clear that battery technology is one of those things that evolve over time. You now have iron-based batteries where you couldn't even argue that the EV is more putting more weight to the environment than an ICE car. But if we're looking at the lithium ones, then that is a rare metal, and that means that the starting point, the environmental footprint of the EV is greater. Let's just assume that the environmental footprint of the EV starts worse than an ICE. The more you drive, the more you save. So an ICE is rather crappy. So for every kilometer you are driving your ICE, that means that you are adding an environmental footprint that is greater than with a comparable EV. That added footprint compared to the EV is greater in countries where you have a relatively clean energy mix, and it's less in countries where you have a relatively dirty energy mix. And here I take the example of Sweden versus Poland. Sweden, we have hydro energy as a predominant source of energy. We also have lots of wind, and we also have lots of nuclear. And with that mix, we have very little CO2 emissions. It's only when there is no wind and we have issues with the nuclear power plants that we actually need to start one of those fossil power plants. But it's a rare occasion. So that's when we need to import energy from outside. So the relatively clean Swedish energy means that an EV is sort of reducing its footprint faster than if you are buying an EV in Poland. But if you're driving long enough, it's for sure going to overtake the ICE, but it will take longer in Poland than it will in Sweden. So, but the basic conclusion here is if you are driving your car very short, so you're basically owning a car and you're only using it rarely and you're driving short distances on a rather not very often, it could take forever before you overtake the comparable ICE. But again, then you're not really interested in cars. Then you can have like any car. So the cases where an EV is less good for the environment than an ICE, they should be rather rare. So this is a really weak argument, and it's only an argument if you're driving really, really short distances. Economy, it's basically the same as the argument for environment. So if you look at what an EV costs today, they have been reduced in price over the last few years to a level where the difference is really, really small. But again, let's assume that the EV is more expensive. The EV does not require any service. The cost per driven kilometer is lower because the cost for electricity in most countries I've looked at is less than the comparable fossil fuel. So that means if you're driving very, very short, then economy could be worse for an EV than an ICE car. This is just comparing apples to apples, so new car versus new car. The issue here with EVs is that they are still in short supply on the second-hand market, which means that if your budget doesn't allow buying a new car, you're looking for a second-hand car, the EV options for second-hand car might be rather few and rather expensive due to the shortage. That's how market economy works. If there are few, the prices tend to go up if there is a significant demand. But don't compare a second-hand ICE to a new EV, because that would be a totally unfair comparison. If your budget allows only a second-hand car, then your argument should be that, there are so few second-hand EVs, and they seem not to be in very good shape. They're all very heavily driven. So I'm looking at buying one, but eventually when the prices get down, because there are more EVs on the second-hand market. But if you are sort of budget-wise to buy a new car, then the economy is only making sense as an argument if you're basically not driving the car at all. Feel and peer pressure. I think this is sort of a strong one, but it's rarely touched upon by ICE fans. They love the sound, they love the smell, and they also have like a social context where the car is an important part of sort of their personality. It's the same kind of peer pressure that makes people smoke. When we all went to school back in our early days, and a number of people started smoking and others started smoking as well because it made them look cool in front of other people. So they were doing a silly thing to impress other people. So, I mean, feel free to love your ICE car, feel free to love the shaking and smoking and smelling of your ICE. But if you are feeling a peer pressure that you should have an ICE car because it's expected of you from your friend, then you should consider if you have the right kinds of friends. If they force you to make a decision on your purchases that is against your best interest, then do reconsider, because that's not really a valid argument, is it? Aesthetics and design. One of the things I hear really, really often is, I hate the sort of scaled down interior design of EVs. I like my buttons and levers. I don't just want that middle console screen. I hate that aesthetics. Now you're making the totally erroneous assumption that an EV is a Tesla. There are dozens of other producers of EVs. You can buy a Volkswagen, you can buy an Audi, you can buy a Porsche. There are EVs from most of the established brands. So if you don't like the aesthetics of Tesla, then buy another EV. This is not an argument. It's an argument against buying a Tesla, but it's not an argument against EVs. You can't trust batteries. This is the one that I hear the most, I would say. Which is, and it's such a bullshit argument. Batteries have been around for a long time. And they have been around in cars for a long time. So, you get some sort of warranty if you buy an EV. So the battery they are warranted for a much longer period than the actual sort of physical structure of the car. They degrade only a few percentage per year for the first few years, and then it basically flattens out. You need to drive so far during the lifespan of your car if you get into the position where your batteries have degraded so the car is unusable because of that. It's not an argument. This is the argument that is brought up the most, and it's probably the least substantial ones. If you are one of those who bought a car and drove it so far that you needed to change the engine of your ICE car, then this could be a valid argument. It's valid for people driving taxis, but very, very few of us who just own a car would drive a car far enough for the batteries to become an issue. So don't bring this up. Look at the statistics on this. Look at the degradation or the degradation of batteries from real sort of unbiased providers of statistics for that kind of data. It's not an issue. If you would have changed a number of engines of your ICE, then this might be an issue. Otherwise, don't bring this up as an argument. It only makes you look ignorant. So these were the topics I would like to bring up. So it's impractical for a number of use cases. It's also so that, if your usage pattern is such that an EV actually doesn't really fit because you are going far under a time pressure, that is a really valid argument. If you don't have any charger at home or couldn't get one at home, that could also be a valid argument. Oh, I should mention one other. You could not use EVs during winter. Yes, you can. You surely can. So EVs don't need to start. There is no engine that needs to be started. It's just when you push the pedal, you are allowing energy to go from the batteries to the engine, and off you go. So if you have issues with an ICE when it's cold, you won't have the same issues with an EV. They are actually a better winter car. The distance you can travel on one charge is lower, but the car will start immediately when you push the accelerator. Unless what happens when you try to twist the key of your ICE. So EVs are actually a better winter car. So also, winter car argument, void. Don't use that. Makes you look ignorant. Thank you for watching Pontus Points, and feel free to buy and own and proudly brag about your ICE, but do it for the right reasons. Don't bring up stupid arguments. Bring up real, tangible arguments, because there are such for owning an IC. Bye bye.